Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
To another edition of Word in Your Attic, and a singer and a songwriter who pretty much ticks every box for us, not least because he's recorded with Nancy Sinatra and Dwayne Eddy, and he once made a record in a cave. It's the fantastic Richard Hawley. Richard, it's lovely to see you.
Lovely to see anybody.
Yeah, and you're at home in Sheffield, right?
I am, yeah.
Can you remember the record playing equipment that was in your home when you were a kid?
I've still got it.
What was it?
I can show you if the camera will move. Or can you see there?
Oh, right.
Oh,
There
yeah, fantastic.
It's on legs. It's one of those things on legs.
Yeah, it's an old dance set. It was my grandmother's.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Yeah, it was my grandma's. And I mean, my grandparents had one of those massive sideboard
Right.
record players, you know, that was like a piece of furniture rather than a radiogram.
Radiogram, indeed.
Yeah, and to be honest, that sounded amazing, you know. And Grandad and Nana and Grandad, they were really cool because they'd let me play anything because he was a musician as well as a soldier and a steelworker. And
are you talking about your pa here, or your?
No,
my grandfather.
Your grandfather? Because you was telling us about your father too, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, Albert. This is Albert Edward Wright, and he was a violinist and a pianist, and he'd been on the music halls and stuff like that. You know, in the back in the day, probably before the war, I guess. And he just loved music of any kind, even you know, really heavy rock and roll. He'd love it. And my nanan hated music, but she was deaf as fuck. So it didn't matter.
But your dad was, played with all sorts of people, didn't he? Sonny Boy Williamson, I think. Is that right?
Yeah,
Johnny
he
Hooker.
did.
So tell us about him. And he was a professional musician.
Yeah, he was semi-pro. I mean, it was. He went professional for a while. He went to London, actually. He lived there for 6 months. And he shared a house with, I think it was Peter Noon from Herman's Hermits and the guitarist. And he used to show the guitarist how to play because he said he was rubbish. Yeah. And Dad called him Herman's Herberts. Because they were pretty boys and that, but they couldn't really play. And I think Mickey Mouse used to produce all their stuff, and they get session guys in initially. I think that changed later. Yeah. But that was kind of 65, 66. And that was, 66 was probably, my mum got pregnant with me. And then he wasn't earning enough money. So he came back home and went to work in the steelworks. But before that, late 50s, excuse me, guys, I might cough every now and again, so I'm not feeling so great. But anyway, my Uncle Frankie, who I think you're aware of actually, Mark, Frank White, and he used to run the house band at the Mojo Club in Sheffield, which was run by Peter Stringfellow.
Peter Stringfellow, of course.
Yeah, and Pete was born opposite where we lived in Pittsmore with his brother in the 50s at some point. And him and Dad were mates, and Frankie were mates. Anyway, Dad used to run the house band at another club in Sheffield called the Esquire, which is now the Lead Mill. And they'd basically just they'd back musicians who came to play, and a lot of those were the black R&B musicians of the day because of it was a fortuitous, for British music, definitely a fortuitous draconian rule with the Musicians Union that you couldn't bring your own musicians over from America. They had to do an exchange thing. So if you brought one musician over here, you'd have to send a British musician over there. That was kind of this weird rule at the time. And of course, all the American musicians just went, well, we'll just use your guys, you know. Yeah. But the byproduct of that was that's kind of how, in every area in the country, how the Animals started in Newcastle, Do you know what I mean? All over the country, because there was backing bands that were basically pickup bands that were backing all these R&B artists. And Dad got to play with John Lee Hooker, and he played with Sonny Boy Williamson, and the stories from that are hilarious, you know. And probably
what kind of thing?
I don't know whether it's permissible to say these things, because you know, they're pretty hardcore. But I'll tell you one, which was Sonny Boy. Bearing in mind, this was like the early 60s, when pubs closed at 10:30, and Dad was I think he was still a teenager, you know, late teens, maybe early 20s, and Sonny Boy refused to go on unless there was a bottle of whiskey. And they were playing in the Esquire, which largely sold coffee, you know, to teenagers, you know. And the drummer, Fermo, and they were panicking because he absolutely point blank refused to go on. And Fermo, the drummer, said, Dave, to me dad, he goes, my granddad's got an old bottle of whiskey in the cellar. We could go up in the van and get it. And they only lived up the road. So they piled in the van to get this bottle of whiskey. And Dad managed to keep Fermo's grandfather talking while John Firminger went into the cellar to get this bottle of whiskey, which happened to be, he'd put a 40-year-old bottle of Lafray whiskey down in case they ever got a grandchild. You know, and they lived in 2 up, 2 down houses. They weren't rich people, you know. It was, so John managed to sneak this bottle out under his coat, and they piled it back to the gig, gave it to Sonny Boy, at which point they didn't have a bottle opener, and it had got a seal in it or something. Right. So he literally snapped the neck off the whiskey.
Oh no!
And got his dick out.
Oh.
And wiped his dick around the rim of the bottle and said, anybody want a drink?
Oh, God, no.
And then he proceeded to basically drink half the bottle of whiskey down in one. And they went on and did the set, and Dad said he was amazing. And, I mean, at this point in time, he was spitting blood into a spittoon. He didn't have very long to live, you know. It was pretty hardcore. And they played the gig, and he came off, and he drank the other half of the bottle. And then after the gig, he wanted to get some more booze, and they couldn't. Everything was closed, so they just took him back to his digs, and that was it. Please excuse me. There are more stories, but if you don't mind...
We may be all right with that.
Yeah. I think, yeah.
That'll suffice.
Yeah,
that's very funny.
That's just the tip of the iceberg.
No,
there are loads more. You know,
what kind of stuff was playing on the record player? Because with your dad being in those kind of bands, what kind of music were you growing up listening to? You know, when you were very young.
Well, I was born in January '67, so I just became aware. I mean, a lot of the records behind me here are about a third of them are Dad's and Mum's records. You know, I managed to. Wow. Yeah, he's during the steel strikes, Dad had to sell a lot of his records just to feed us, you know. But I managed to squirrel quite a lot away under the stairs or under my bed to save them from the coal. And they're very precious to me, you know, a lot of them. Well, not all of them. But it was anything, really. I mean, I grew up with rock and roll, hillbilly music, bluegrass, the Everleys, like a lot of R&B and old Mississippi Delta stuff. A lot of music like Cajun music from Louisiana and so on and so forth, you know.
Well, you've got a few singles there, haven't you? So show us a few records and tell us about those.
I mean, do you just want 7-inch singles? I can dig into that.
Whatever you got, any old thing.
Whatever looks good.
Can you remember the first single you ever bought?
It was a 78, which I've still got.
Wow.
we used to go, it wasn't by choice particularly. Dad used to go with his mates, who were all musicians, to a record shop in Sheffield called Kenny's Records on the Wicker, which just sold rock and roll. And maybe the odd country thing, but not, it was more the sort of country stars that recorded rockabilly, you know. It was quite a specialist place, and it was unique as well, because Kenny, or Uncle Kenny as I used to call him, he was like a walking library of music, you know. He's an incredible person. He's still with us, actually. So I have a drink of water. Sorry, it's really irritating, the cough. I can't help it.
Fine.
Sorry.
No, it's cough's a cough.
And I'd be, you know, be dragged along with Dad, and they'd be talking about music and stuff, and I was just a kid. But at about 6, 7 years old, and at my level, I was kind of, you know, under the counter, wandering around, looking for stuff to do. And Kenny used to keep all these old 78s, because nobody wanted them back then. And I remember seeing one at the front one day, and it got the purple Capitol Records label, and it was Gene Vincent, Race with the Devil. And we'd got a backup baby on the other side, and I remember pulling my dad's shirt, like just going, Dad, can I have this one? And he looked and he went, they can have that one. And that was it. And then later, because we were pretty skinny, I used to, we used to get what they call ex-jukebox records. And so we'd have to wait for stuff to go out of the charts. And it was in the local ironmongers. Yeah. And they used to have like a carousel thing of all the singles. And this was when I was about 12, 13. And Steve Mackey, the bass player from Pulp, who obviously we've just sadly lost. And but he and I met on the first day of infant school. And Steve got a Saturday job working in Hood Arts. And if there was anything I liked, he'd stick it aside until I got enough money to buy it, you know. But that was like, that era was the Specials and Adam and the Ants, Stray Cats, that kind of thing.
Right.
And that was just before I started listening to John Peel. Right. And then everything changed, you know.
There's something very appealing about an ex-jukebox single, wasn't there, really? It was always kind of almost worn flat, wasn't it, from being playing on the jukebox, and it always had a large hole in the middle, didn't it? Where
the centre, no centre, and you could play them on the old dancettes because they had a little widget, whatever they call, to put in the centre, you know.
A dink, yeah.
Yeah, and now it's funny because I've got I don't know if you can see it, that metal thing above us, the big, just sticking out, that was made by an old engineer friend of Dad's who used to work with him in the factories. And that's a big lever pull to actually dink the 7-inch singles.
Oh, really?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Because I've got, it's just round the corner. I'll try and show you in a bit, guys. But from my ill-gotten gains, I managed to convince my wife that it was a great idea that I was allowed to have a jukebox. So,
oh, really? So you got one?
I've got a Wurlitzer 1800, a 1955 one.
Wow.
And that is a thing of great beauty. And it sounds amazing. It's got a big 15-inch speaker and 2 8-inch smaller speakers in it. And you listen to Little Richard and Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran, and even actually modern hip-hop records, it can handle that, the bass on those. And it just sounds phenomenal. And it's got
nearly 70 years old and it still works.
Yeah, but it works, and it sonically works. You know, they knew what they were doing. You know?
Yeah.
If I'll do it, I'll just do it now. Fuck it.
Go on.
Just go around the corner and see if you can see it. Because can you see that? Oh, wait a minute. Where are we?
Oh,
yeah.
Right. Well, where a second.
Where is it?
Oh, it was there. Left a bit, left and then down.
Left
there it is, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Bernie the Bolt, please. Yeah,
Christ, that's fantastic.
That's a beautiful thing. Lovely.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Okay, back to square one, lads.
Yes, it'll probably take threepenny bits. So what are those records? Show us some of the records you've got.
The ones...
Yeah. What you got there? Wave some records at us.
I don't know whether you know. Do you know the song "Rambling Rose" that the MC5 did?
Yes.
Rambling Rose, rambling. Well, the original version of that was done by Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah.
Which is a lot slower. But I've got into this one lately. It's absolutely awesome.
Right. Who's that by? I can't read it. Go on.
It's Beauregard and the Toughs. Not a name you hear every day.
No, it's not.
Beauregard and the Toughs.
That's a new one on me.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, Rambling Rose. If you check it out, I don't know whether you play music on this podcast thing.
Not on this. We can't.
But you could list. Maybe you could list them for folks to, because you know I collect records, but I don't believe in squirreling things away. I like to share. You know.
Right. Yeah.
And
we'll go looking for Beauregard and the Toughs.
No,
that'll be on YouTube somewhere.
Yeah.
Everything is.
Everything's on YouTube. It's difficult to get hold of the singles, but
no, absolutely.
I don't know whether you've heard this one. I mean, if I DJ at parties, I play these kind of things.
Oh, my baby's coming home. Is
BB King?
Oh, BB King. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Do you know that track?
Right. I don't know if I do actually.
Yeah, it's a monster. It's when a lot of the R&B artists had kind of ended their supposed time at their various labels, whether it be Sun Records, Chess, or a lot of the soul artists, they started out actually on this label, and it was ABC Paramount. And they created some fabulous sounding records. They were amazing. Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions ended up on there, and they made some of their best records on that label.
Right.
That was I'm trying to show you. This is awesome. Do you know? Obviously you've heard of Little Walter, right?
Of course. Yes.
This is a track called Up the Line, and he plays chromatic harmonica on that, and it's absolutely mind blowing. And it's a good groove if you want to get up with your partner and boogie after a couple of glasses. Yeah. That's one.
He did a fantastic version of My Babe, didn't he? The old Willie Dixon song.
Yeah,
brilliant harmonica on it.
Well, that was another artist, you see, that came over in the 60s. Frankie, my Uncle Frank White, he played with him. He played with him at the Esquire, Little Walter. I did a radio show years ago, and it was called The Gig You Wish You'd Been At. And I know Paul Weller did it, and I think he chose The Who live at Leeds. And Guy Garvey did it, and he chose Talk or something like that. But I chose I Wish I Could Go Back in Time and watch my Uncle Frank playing with Little Walter at the Esquire Club. And we did a whole radio show, and it was great because we got to talk to Charlie Musselwhite on that show, who was incredibly gracious. And he was playing a UK tour at the time. And anyway, that's another thing.
Right.
What else we got? Oh, this is cool. Let me just get this so it's in the middle. This is an original one, this one. This is on Sun.
All right. A You Bangy Stomp.
That's a great record.
I've got that myself.
It's a brilliant record.
Yeah, that's got all my dad's handwriting on it.
It's all about being in the reeds, isn't it, in Africa?
Yeah.
And seeing the natives doing this unholy dance. That's right. It's fantastic.
That's all Dad's. Dad decorated the sleeve, which is quite cool.
Yeah.
It's very good.
We can be going here quite a while, boys.
That's good.
I like looking at old records.
Same here. You know, this is a lesser known Chuck Berry track. Do you know this one?
Dear Dad.
No.
Yes,
Well, you
I've
should-
probably heard it. Yeah, go on.
It's a later one,
It's a later one.
but that's got. I think it's got his best guitar solo ever on it,
Oh, really?
and the
So when
band are ferocious. I mean, it sounds like the Stones, but later on, it's a lot heavier. You know.
So when you say a later Chuck Berry, how late do you mean? When he came out of prison, or
No, it's Dear Dad. I think that's judging by the label, which is a mid-60s chess label.
Right,
I'd say that's probably 64 or 5. I
okay?
think. Oh, this is brilliant. Both sides of this are absolutely... This is a reissue, this one, but it's... do you know a guy called Frank Mignon?
No.
No, I don't.
Do you one on me?
Right. That one's called Watermelon, the Watermelon Man, but it's not that song. And the other side is even better, which is called How Much Land Does a Man Need When He's 6 feet in the Ground? I think there's quite a few
Is that a country record?
Nah, yeah, I think a few politicians need to listen to that.
Yeah.
Oh, this one's a good one. This is one of Dad's. This is The Clash covered this song. You know, Brand New Cadillac.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, is that Vince Taylor and so forth?
Yeah, it's the original on Parlophone Records.
Beautiful Parlophone label that is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Bag as well.
Yeah, I know. I've got 7,000 7-inch singles, boys, so I'm happy to carry on as long as you want, you know.
Can you remember the records records when you were, I don't know, a teenager that really, really knocked you out and had a real effect on you, just changed the way you thought about music and your musical taste or whatever?
Bunnymen, really.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I love the Bunnymen. I still do. And now I get to play with them whenever they play Sheffield. Will or Mac will give me a call, and we usually get up and do a cover of the Velvet Underground, I'm Waiting for the Man.
Fantastic.
We don't have to rehearse for it. We're just up, you know. And because when I was with the Long Pigs, we toured in America in '97. We were the support band, opening band for the Bunnymen in America. And I struck up a real good friendship with Les, the bass player, who's now he's in Australia building boats, and Will, obviously, he's a good pal, and Mike, and we just stayed mates after the tour, and it's for me, because I heard the Bunnymen first through Peel, you know, listening to John, and all that period of time, it was such an exciting period of time for music, because the whole concept of indie was just kind of starting, you know, with Edwyn Collins doing the postcard records, you know, in Scotland, and a spirit of independence in music that wasn't part of the mainstream stuff, which occasionally you'd get a band that would get away on Top of the Pops, you know, like the Bunnymen or the Cure or something like that. But for me personally, most of the stuff that was on Top of the Pops just didn't mean anything. It was shy, you know.
Can you remember the first group you ever saw?
I played the gig with my Uncle Frank.
Oh, right.
Oh, right, okay.
I was 12 or 13, but the first group I ever saw, ask me one on Sport, lads. I'm not sure I can remember. It's a long time ago. First group I ever went to see, it will have been at the Leadmill, but I used to play the gigs, you see. I was playing it all the time from being a kid, you know. I can't remember the first gig.
But just a gig that really made an impression, whether it was the first one or not, something that was just, you thought was mind-blowing.
I mean, I remember being impressed by the spirit of everything to do with Creation Records, you know, a lot of those bands. And I was 15, something like that, 16. Actually, no, I saw the Cramps. And my cousin, he used to know all the door staff who worked at the Limit Club in Sheffield, and I was underage, and he kind of sneaked me in under his overcoat. And I saw the Cramps.
So this is early Cramps with Brian Gregory.
Yeah, really.
With the incredible hair.
Yeah, yeah.
And the weirdest looking man I've ever seen. I saw them then. They're incredible.
Yeah. And Nick Knox on drums. I met Nick later, much later, many years later. He was playing with Link Wray in America. And it was in the El Rey Theatre in Philadelphia. And that was that same tour with the Bunnymen. And he played... There was this huge old theatre, really old, kind of dilapidated theatre. And this is good, actually. And he was playing an early show, and one of the people at the record company came into our dressing room and just said, "Anybody interested in Link Wray?" And I was the only person that put my hand up, and the rest of the band went, "Who the fuck's that?" And I went, "Would you like to go? I've got tickets." And I went, "Please, what time is he on?" And he was on at 7:30, and we were on at 9 o'clock, but it was on the same street. Well, obviously it's America, so streets are really huge. And we got in a cab and got there, got in and saw him play. And Link had these impenetrable black shades on and a homemade guitar that was like, it was a sort of doctored, it was an English guitar actually. It was a Wem, what were they called? A Wem rapier guitar that he'd kind of fucked with himself. And he had, and Nick Knox was on drums. And there was literally, honestly, guys, there was, I bet, not even 10 people in the audience in this huge theatre. And we were just leaning on this bar and having a couple of drinks, watching this amazing show. And even though there was basically no one there, he played as if he was playing in front of a full stadium. It was 100% commitment to what he was doing. And he was amazing. But there was a funny thing because the guitar lead was really short for some reason. And he kept moving around the stage and pulling the cable out of the amp. So he kept looking around going, what's happening? And this long-suffering roadie kept getting him to stand in the middle of the stage and re-plug the cable into the amp. And then this would repeat and repeat and repeat. And then eventually the roadie, this is all while the fucking gig's going on. The music didn't stop. It just kept going. And then eventually the roadie, the amp was on casters. So the roadie ended up following him round stage with the amplifier. So he didn't pull the lead out. And then he played an amazing show. It was wild guitar, really. And I was so grateful to have been able to see him. And then after the gig, we kind of looked at the clock and just thought we better go. And Link came shooting out of this dressing room and headed straight for the bar. And we were the only two people there. And he picked up my drink, which was just a little shot of whiskey and a half a beer. And he necked them both. And he just said in an almost impenetrable southern drawl, "This is God's gospel truth." And he just goes, "You got any more of that?" And then we ordered some more drinks. And then by that time, I found out later that his tour manager was his wife. So basically, reading between the lines, he'd managed to escape to the bar, neck as much alcohol as he could in as short a time as possible. And then his wife came out of the dressing room and they had this set to in a deep southern drawl. I couldn't understand a word at the time. And she kind of dragged him off. And before he left, though, I got him to sign the ticket. And I was so excited about this that I put this ticket in an envelope and sent it to my dad. And when I got home, I said, "Dad, did you get this was before mobile phones, a long time before all that. So you couldn't text people or anything like that. And when I got home, I said, "Did you get the thing?" And he said, "What thing?" And it never arrived. It got lost in the post. So I was really gutted about that.
Heartbreaker.
Well, I've got the great story, so
it's beautiful. Great. It is a fantastic story. I can really understand you liking Link Wray. There's a real sensibility of Link Wray and the music you play, and amazing that you would have heard of him then because his big peak was whatever it was in the late 50s, really, wasn't it? Rumble.
Yeah, with Rumble. He had Rumble, but I mean, there's one album. I know where it is. I can get it out, and whether you're going to edit this, I don't know, but. Yeah. I've been after a single of his actually for years called Comanche. I don't know whether you know it.
All right, okay. No,
and I've got it in that pile just over there. That's all the kind of new stuff, which is just there. And that's all the stuff. I'm excited talking about records, guys. It's fucking great.
No, it's great.
Yeah. It's not very often that anybody gets me out of bed before midday, but it's good to talk. Nice.
But it's amazing, somebody like Link Wray, really, that still known by people a long, long time after he had his kind of hit, really, because I only knew about him about 20 years after the hit.
Yeah.
And that was via Pete Townsend. I think Pete Townsend was the person who used to go on about Link Wray.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I've met Jimmy Page a few times because he came to see Dwayne play, with that album that I produced for him. And I got the good fortune to meet Jimmy, and we were all talking about Link Wray. And Dwayne had massive respect for him. Yeah. But it's ink in water, isn't it? I don't know. That's the thing with good music. Eventually, it finds its way.
It does. I think that's definitely true.
Yeah.
Definitely true.
It takes time, but, it's the influence that Link had on people. And it's not just his guitar playing. He was a brilliant songwriter,
So I've actually found my Link Wray album. There it is. There's Good Rockin' Tonight by Link Wray and the Raymen on Union Pacific. And that must have come out in about 1972, and that's years after he'd first made Rumble. It's described here as stereo panned mono. Don't know what that means, but not hi-fi, but has its charm. What have you got there, Richard?
This was one later.
Oh, that's a really good record. That came out in 1971, I think I'm right in saying. It's a really good record, that is.
And it's recorded in his mother's, it's called Mother Ray's 3-track shack. Yeah. It's literally a chicken shack. There was 4 singles off this album, and I've got them all on the jukebox. Cool. And one of them's called Jukebox Mama. And that's an absolutely awesome record. And he sings because I heard a story, I don't know if it's true, but Ray was reluctant to sing because he only had one lung. And he didn't feel confident enough to keep going a whole show. I don't know whether that's true. But that album's awesome. It's I think if push came to shove, apart from the early rockabilly stuff, is that and Tim Rose's first album, with Morning Dew on it.
Oh, right, okay.
Do you know that album?
Yeah, I know his version of Morning Dew. I'm trying to see his first record. I don't have that.
He's just in a black T-shirt with a cigar.
Yes.
And it's got Bernard Purdie on drums. And Bernard at the time was, I think, 17 years old. And that's an awesome record.
Right.
And I actually listened to that Link Wray one and the Tim Rose album with, let me see if I can reach for it.
We could play Record Roulette.
It's Record Roulette. We had this idea of a game called Record Roulette where you lean backwards and just randomly pluck a sleeve.
Take a record.
Behind you. And then you have to talk about it. Seriously, we are playing Record Roulette.
What's he got?
Yeah, maybe because my second name is Hawley.
Right.
Perhaps I should invent something called Preparation H.
Yeah.
That's
it. I've got that record. That's a good record.
I love this.
The Adventures of Dillard and Clark.
Oh, Dillard Clark, yes.
The Fantastic Expedition of Dillard and Clark.
Fantastic Expedition of Dillard and Clark.
And they're on the cover sharing a reefer on a Harley Davidson Electric Glide. That's 19. I adore this record.
Out on the side.
That's brilliant. There's a track called "There's a Train Leaves Here This Morning." And the lyric is, "There's a train leaves here this morning. I don't know what I might be on."
Didn't the Eagles do that as well?
Don't know.
I think they did.
There was a lovely little Southern California country rock scene, wasn't there, at that time, with the Flying Burritos and sort of Mike Nesmith and people.
Yeah,
they were kind of part of. It was just a lovely little moment.
Mike Nesmith made a great record called "Tantamount to Treason." That's really good.
There are all those early Mike Nesmith RCA records are all really good. Fighter, all of those. Go on.
I met Mike in California somewhere. It was on tour, and it was through a friend who knew him, and we ended up having a jam. And I was a bit pissed. I remember that, and probably high as well. But at the end of it, he gave me a guitar.
Really?
Yeah, it was a Gretsch Monkeys guitar. It was this guitar. The Gretsch guitars are
made for the monkeys.
Made for the monkeys, and he just gave me one. I think he'd probably got 100 in the garage. You know,
you haven't got it anywhere next to you, have you?
I haven't. It's in the lockup, but.
Oh, what an amazing thing! A Monkeys guitar played by Mike Nesmith. That's terrific.
Yeah. I've got my two favourite guitars here within sort of easy reach. But you'd have to do some editing. But yeah, if you want to talk about guitars, but I'm sure we can talk about records. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, this is one I need to show you guys. This is awesome. Now, this is recorded in the early 80s. And it's
Dave Phillips.
Dave Phillips and the Hot Rod Gang. And it's their version of Tainted Love.
Tainted Love.
Right.
Trust me, it's a mother.
All right.
You've got to hear it. It's absolutely phenomenal. And it was kind of when there was that rockabilly revival sort of thing, but it's an amazing record and sounds great as well.
So that's a kind of rockabilly version then?
Yeah, but it's superb, you know.
Oh, really? Well, I'd love to hear that. Love that song.
Well,
do you get people around and play them records? What are your rituals around records? Are there certain times of the day or week or whatever that you listen to things?
You know, it's funny, as I get older, I have huge periods of silence. You know, I don't play anything. And that's usually when I'm writing, actually, to be honest. But I just not need to have as little information going in as possible to just shut off. That's the way I do it anyway. But, yeah, we have mates around, play records. There's no rituals, I guess. The jukebox is very popular with my mates.
Right.
Because it's 250 watts. You know, you can whack it up really loud, you know. And there's a track by an artist called Little Bob called I Got Loaded. Do you know it?
I probably don't
know.
No,
I don't think I do.
It's Los Lobos covered it at some point.
Oh, I know that song. But, yes. Go on.
But yeah, that whenever we put that one on, we tend to follow the instructions in the record and get loaded, you know.
Large whiskey every time one's mentioned, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
That's really good.
We can keep going with this stuff.
Go on.
Oh, that's a belter. Flatfoot Sam by Oscar Wills.
Oh, right.
No.
On the Argo label.
It's been an education.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, there's a million and one things like this, small independent American labels, things you never heard of.
And this is, you've heard of Memphis Mini, right?
Yeah.
Well, you need to check this version out because this is monster. And is Big Mama Thornton, I'm sure you've also heard of.
Yeah.
She did the original version of Hound Dog.
Yeah.
Which Lieber and Stoller wrote for her before Elvis did it. But later on Kent Records, Big Mama did a version of Me and My Chauffeur.
Oh, right.
That is the funkiest record ever. It's phenomenal. You'll like that. You'll like that one. Trust me, guys, you'll like that one.
So how often do you kind of restock your jukebox, or is it always... have you decided what's on the jukebox and it never changes? No.
Well, that's a good thing, actually, David. You mentioned about rituals. It's every kind of couple of weeks because it only has 52 singles. So I change them every couple of weeks.
Oh, really?
Well, I tend to be lazy because you press a button and you get a tune, you know. And, I mean, I listen to music on that. I've got my old Technics 1210s, which I love because they do sound great, but they've got a massive weighting system on them. And I play a load of really old records that are generally fucked. So, I mean, you know, it'd play a pizza. Do you know what I mean? And I've got, I don't know whether you can see it on the side there.
You got decks there, have you? Yeah.
No, it's an old Sony portable record player.
Oh, right.
From the 60s, and they called it the James Bond portable record
right,
player.
in a case, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so the speakers are like
the speakers in the case, right?
Yeah, and so when you assemble it, it looks like James Bond's kind of briefcase with all the secret weapons and stuff. But that's made by, I think it's a Sanyo one. Yeah, it's Sanyo. That's absolutely mega. And I kind of keep that because you can only get it to a really tiny amount of volume, really. It still sounds great, but you can't whack it up. And I tend to play records late at night on that, so I don't basically piss everyone off in the house.
So you program the machine for the people who are coming round, the things that you think they might like?
Yeah, and myself and my missus. Yeah, excuse me. I mean, the thing about the jukebox was that, thank heaven, that we got that just before lockdown. That arrived about 2 months, maybe a month and a bit before lockdown. So that kept us company.
What a great place to be during lockdown, your place. That sounds absolutely a dream.
Oh, well, only if you like this kind of music, because otherwise it'd be a fucking nightmare,
Yeah. So tell us about, you've got a new record out, which you've got to plug.
Do I?
Well, yeah.
Something else.
You got a compilation, Now Then, is that right?
Yeah, they call it a best of.
So was that, that's 22 years worth of stuff. Was it hard to come up with the track list for that?
It's 25 years, actually.
25 years.
Hence me allowing it to happen, because it was a quarter of a century, a quarter of a century ago, I went solo. A quarter of a century ago, I got married. And a quarter of a century ago, I gave up drugs. Tell you what, lads, I don't half miss fucking drugs, I tell you. He was my bass player, Colin, and he's the co-producer. And Graham, my manager, said, look, it's a bit of a marker post in the road. It's a quarter of a century. Should we do that? I didn't want to do a greatest hits because I hadn't had any fucking hits. So it was just kind of a collection. And I thought, yeah, okay, as long as I don't have to have anything to do with the compiling of it, because I couldn't make the choices.
Oh, right, okay.
So I just wouldn't be able to be, where's the word, partisan or whatever, enough for that, or non-partisan. So Colin did it, and I just made a couple of changes. It was that simple, really. It's probably the easiest thing, because I had virtually no involvement in it, and stress-free for them.
Very nice. I was sad that my absolute personal favourite, Roll River Roll, wasn't on it, but I was thrilled to see that you put your version of Ballad of a Thin Man by Bob Dylan. Why do you like that song so much? I can really see that fitting with your sensibility. Why do you like it so much?
I like its kind of cynicism, is that it's got this undertone, this really veiled threat, and not so veiled, I guess. But it's just, in any time that you live in, you're surrounded by people who just don't get don't get a lot of what's happening, and unfortunately most of them now are not just men in suits, they rule countries. And when it was Cillian Murphy and Anthony Byrne, who's the director of Peaky Blinders, they got into, apparently the story goes that they went to the pub and said, right, who's going to sing the finale of Peaky Blinders? Which is what, I recorded that for that, specifically. And they, after a couple of pints of Guinness, they said, it has to be Hawley. So they got my number from an actor friend of mine, actually, called Tony Pitts, because I didn't know him. And they called me up, and I was in Fagan's pub in the middle of a Cayley session, quite balls deep into Guinness at that point, quite heavily. And they got hold of me, and Tom, the landlord, used to have one of those old-fashioned phones where it had a big long lead, and I sat on the stairs of the pub with a sliding door, and they tried to make some kind of sense to me out of what they wanted. And I gave them... Oh, the reason why they couldn't get in touch with me was because I'd left my mobile phone in the other pub next door, so no one knew where I was. Yeah. And then anyway, a couple of days later, cut a very dull story short, they called me back when I wasn't pissed and said, we really want you to do this Ballad of a Thin Man. And I love that song anyway. You know, everybody loves Dylan, I'm sure. But and we just went in the studio and we did it in an afternoon. You know, it's that simple. But I like it because it's quite...
So it was done for Peaky Blinders?
Yes, it was done for that.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think we did not a too bad job on it, so it kind of warrants a place, really.
Look, the way we traditionally finish these things is we ask people to tell us what's the greatest record ever made. Now, in your case, I know you got no shortage of choices there. I'm sure you're like me, you can choose a different record every day. What would it be in your case?
Sort of impossible to answer. But now, we've been talking about vinyl all this time. And I hate CDs. But Bear Family, which I'm not going to reach over so you have to re-edit again, in the corner there, I don't know if you can see laid flat there, that's a CD box set of Arthur Big Boy Crudup.
All right.
On Bear Family. Now, they don't do it on vinyl. And it would be either Fats Domino or Arthur Crudup that I would choose as my favourite singer that's given me the most as a singer.
Right.
And the thing that kicked off rock and roll, if you take it as That's All Right Mama by Elvis on Sun Records, well, the guy that wrote that was Arthur Crudup. And actually, I prefer his version. And, well, he recorded 4 or 5 versions, but the real kick-ass version that he did is that I think is the greatest record ever made because of... It's a bit academic in a way, but I enjoy listening to it, and I never get tired of it, you know.
Right.
The same way I never tire of the Velvet Underground or the Sonics or Captain Beefheart and 1,000 other artists that I love, and Link Wray and stuff like that. But when I play Arthur, you just know that is the source of the river. You know, I mean, you can go further back than that to Skip James and, you know, Robert Johnson, et cetera, but is the thing that really kicked the barn door open was Crudup. To me, he was the one. And he was such a prolific artist and a wonderful songwriter. And, I mean, Elvis recorded at least 4 or 5 of his songs, to my knowledge, you know, and that was very early on. But I think Crudup he's the one that kicked the ball rolling down the hill, you know.
That's a terrific choice. Fantastic.
That's a very good choice. Well,
so what have you got coming up in the near future?
I'm in a hospital. No, I'm just in the middle of recording a new record called Me Old Fashioned. And, just crack on, you know. I'm 56 now, and I don't intend to stop. And I'm just going to keep going till I can't anymore. Because I've been playing guitar since I was 6. I've been playing in bands since I was 12. And some of those bands have been pretty good. So, and I just want to keep going. That's not an arrogant thing. It's just, we've done all right. And I'm not leaving Sheffield. Bollocks.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.